Okay. All right, so welcome. Welcome to CONDG, Central Ohio.NET Developer Group. They are talking about dropping the dot in .NET, so I hope they don't because we'd have to get a new logo and new name. But we meet usually the fourth Thursday of every month. This is the fifth Thursday of the month, so your speaker selector this month might have forgotten that when communicating dates to our lovely speaker here today. So thank you for your flexibility on dates. We have a YouTube channel where this is being streamed to right now, so the recording will be out there. We'll send you a link to that once that's available. We ask that you would try to be conservative of our bandwidth while we are streaming as well. There is improving guest that you can connect to if you click through the button to continue, but just don't be doing anything too taxing on that network. Thank you for improving for the promised pizza and the space to meet in. We will be taking a break once the pizza arrives to partake of that. And thank you to JetBrains for the Raffle sponsor. So we'll be using the random number generator to generate those licenses for those. If you've won one in the last month or you're an organizer here, you are not eligible, I'm sorry, but that's a pretty good, pretty good odds for the rest of you. So that's good. Other groups in the area, there's the Central Ohio Azure group. They meet the second Monday of the month. I need to go more to that group. That's a pretty good group. So you can check out their information there. There's the Global App Dev User Group. This used to be the Central Ohio App Dev User Group, and then I think the Central Ohio Windows Group, and then the Windows Phone Group before that. It's had probably about 6 names over the course I've known it. But that's a really good group, good to check out. There's also the Columbus.js group. This is a new one for our deck today. They meet actually in this room right here, and very good group led by Guy Royce. Had a really phenomenal session this last month, but check them out as well. And then the CBus Data, formerly CBus Pass, they are still meeting. They don't have a whole lot of events notified in the future, but they're still meeting. They're still active. So if you're a data-oriented professional, definitely check them out if you haven't. Okay. Our meeting calendar, we only actually have one more meeting beyond this one for our group for the rest of the year, because pretty soon we're going to be in November and December, and we'll have the end of the year holiday party. Okay. So tonight we have One Config to Rule Them All, an intro to Azure App Configuration by Sam Gomez. Thank you, Sam. Next month we have Navigating Data in Azure Cosmos DB with a Gremlin API for graph databases with Saduki or Sarah Duchiewicz. I'm not very good at saying your last name, but Saduki, she's wonderful. And then stay tuned for details on the holiday party. If there's anything that you want to see in the new year, any topics, any technologies you want to make sure we cover, any speakers, please talk to me, talk to Chandler. We'll make sure we can aggressively convince the speaker to deliver the content for you all. We are always looking to help people. Anyone here hiring? Any hiring managers? Okay. Anybody here looking for a job or maybe about to be looking for a job? Talk to them. I suppose I'm also hiring too, but usually not what people are looking for. So if you want to teach software development, come talk to me. It's actually phenomenally rewarding. Okay, if you want to join us, help us out beyond just speaking or whatever, come talk to Chandler or I or Alan or Steven, and we'll help you get connected and figure out how you can help best, whether that's on social or something else, but always willing to have more help. And then that's all I got for introductions. So Sam, I'm going to let you connect and introduce yourself if you don't mind, because I didn't grab your bio here for today.
No worries.
Whenever you're ready, and I'll turn off the lights for you.
All right, so good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending this presentation. Thank you for everyone online as well. I want to thank Matt, Chandler, and all the organizers for being accommodating with the date, as Matt said. I want to thank the hosts, obviously, for giving us the space to share this today. And I hope you guys find something useful and learn something from this presentation. Presentation is titled One Config to Rule Them All, and Intro to Azure App Configuration. So as Matt said, my name is Sam Gomez. Fun fact about me, I'm originally from Mexico. Been living here in the US for 15 years now. Became a citizen just last year. Very excited about that. Thank you. I am currently a tech lead at a company called Geneca. It's a consulting company out of Chicago. I'm on the fully remote bandwagon for now. When I'm not developing or doing anything crazy, I like to spend time with my family. I have a wife and 2 kids, a 5-year-old and a 1.5 years, which gives us a run for our money. I like watching movies, video games, and anything soccer related. I like to play, I like to watch, and I coach my 5-year-old soccer team, so very passionate about that. You can follow me on Twitter at @thesoccerdev. That's my GitHub repo where you can find the code that you will see today during the demo. And we'd love to connect on LinkedIn as well, either to answer questions that you might have later. Very passionate about Azure Cognitive Services as well, so if you have any questions about that or you just want to network, feel free to send me a request to connect.
Your avatar is on point.
Yeah, that's a beautiful avatar.
Oh, yeah, it was made by the company, so it was professionally done. So what are we going to cover today? What are we going to talk about in this presentation, at least the theory part of it? So we're going to look at the definition of Azure App Configuration, a couple tales from the trenches, so scenarios that I've run into actually this year where I feel like Azure App Configuration could have made a difference. What are the benefits of some of the features that I think are very important, that are very cool to have, or that you can use in Azure App Configuration? And then we're going to look at those features actually on a demo application. So what is Azure App Configuration? This is straight from the Microsoft documentation. It's a cloud service that allows you to centralize configuration and feature management. And I want to emphasize the centralized part, because that's going to come into play into one of these scenarios that I'm going to talk about. So we all know that it's difficult to have an environment that is a dev environment that is stable. I don't know if it's as difficult as not remembering the last time it worked fine, but we all know that with God knows how many developers making changes in there, configuration changes, code changes, it's difficult to have sometimes an environment that is stable enough. So one part of it is obviously a configuration. So this is about giving you an option and showing you something that can help you get rid of that extra risk that you have when you have your configuration, or the risk of changing your configuration with your code. So tales from the trenches, some scenarios that, like I said, I've come across that I want to share with you and share how Azure App Configuration could have helped. First one, local settings checked in. Second one, settings that are shared across different applications. And then finally, repos not being updated. So local settings checked in. This is the classic that you download the repo for an application. You have to make a change locally for a configuration to either troubleshoot or to implement a new feature. And then by accident, you check in your local settings file, and it has your changes. You break development. Hopefully, if everything is set up properly, development is all you break, but you could end up breaking QA, UAT, or other environments if your release pipelines or your build pipelines are not set up properly. Anyone run into that scenario before? I know I've done it. I've seen other people in my team do it. It's very, very common to run into this scenario. So obviously, when you move away from files and when you have especially your configuration separate from your code, you reduce the risk of running into that scenario. So if all you're checking in or all you're changing is your code, and you don't have to worry about running into this accident, it's one way to reduce that risk. Not foolproof, but at least it's a smaller chance that you mess with it. So settings shared across different applications. I ran into it earlier this year. I was working on an application, a website, that is used by a medical company. One morning, I just started the application. I try to go through a flow of the application, and then at one point, it just blows up. It doesn't get 1 or 2 steps. It blows up. I look at the error. It looks like there's the connection string, something with the database is not working. The user is not working properly. I reach out to the client. They bring in a bunch of people. Finally, the DB team realized that the password for that user either expired or somebody changed it by accident, and obviously nobody knew about it. So gave us a new password. I change it. I start the application again, and it goes 2-3 steps, and then it blows up again. Why? Because it turns out that there is a service the application is calling that is also using that same connection string with that same user. So same thing. We have to change it. We have to wait until the build in the release, or the application was released into dev. This happened 2 or 3 more times because it was used across different services the application was using. So again, if you had this centralized, or if you had this in one place, you change it in one spot, and then you don't have to worry about the other applications having to change that. Third scenario, repo is not updated. So this is another one. Again, I ran into it earlier this year. I was working, or we were testing, making changes to an part of the application that is part of an edge case scenario, so you don't run into it very often. So it's one of those that it's working on QA and higher environments, so nobody cares if it's working on dev or not because they don't touch it very often. But now we had to touch it. We had to go in and change, and turns out, again, the configurations were completely outdated. What's more is that this was because some servers were retired. So the client retired some servers. They sent communication in advance, but nobody bothered to go into the repo and update that because, again, nobody touches that in dev, so who cares, right? But if you have it, again, individually, if you have your configurations completely separate from your code, that is something that maybe your infrastructure team can take care of. They can go and change that setting, and they don't have to worry about changing the code, which is not something that you want your infrastructure team to do, but it's something that you could do if you have that decoupling between the configuration and your code. So why should you use that, or what are some of the things that can help you in your applications? What are some of the features that I think would be very useful, not in just these scenarios, but in general? So centralized management setting, we already touched on that. We also have dynamic configuration, feature flag management. We have access to previous version of the configuration, and it also complements Key Vault. So centralized management setting, you have the option of using, if you use labels in your configuration, you can have one instance for all your environments. You can also have separate instance of a configuration per your environment if you want to keep it a little bit more safe. But that's just a screenshot of what it looks like. We're going to see it on the Azure portal in a little bit. But as you can see, again, you keep it all in one spot. You make changes in one spot. Dynamic configuration, this is a feature that allows you to make changes to your configuration that will reflect on your site without having to rebuild it and redeploy it. So again, going back to what I was mentioning earlier, the second scenario specifically, if they had something like this, they could have made the change in the configuration, and we wouldn't have to wait for the application to be redeployed. You can use this by 2 different methods. So first is the polling method. So you're basically just querying Azure App Configuration for any changes to any of the values. Obviously, that's not something that you want to do because it takes away from the dynamic aspect of it, but it's an option that you have. And then the other one is push methods using events. This case, for the example that you're going to see in a minute, it's using Azure Service Bus. So in that scenario, or in this method, you configure an event in your Azure App Configuration. Every time there's a change to a key, it puts an event there. You have to consume that and ask the configuration to be refreshed on the site. But again, it's something that gives you much more dynamic configuration. Yeah.
how would you like us to ask questions? Would you like us to wait to the end, or just as we encounter points of confusion?
Yeah, if you come up with any questions, feel free to ask them.
And I have a pizza update for you. We had to put in a new order. It'll be here 30 to 40. I'm here, so sorry about that.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Sometimes it is.
Yeah.
Since you can push it to the Azure Bus, could that then call a webhook? Is there any webhook capability in this whole thing?
I believe so. What did you say that did you want to do specifically?
So, configuration changes,
Mm-hmm.
can you call a webhook into any particular system?
I
Use the push method.
I think so. I haven't looked at that particular scenario, but you might be able to consume that the event from the service bus in a different way. Feature flag management, that's another thing that if you are doing that on your application, it's another thing that you can do in Azure App Configuration. It also allows you to do dynamic feature management. So in the same way that you can update your configuration, you can also do features in dynamically with the same configuration. And you have the access to feature filters. So depending on what you want to do, if you want to do targeting, if you want to do a time window, so if you want to enable a feature, if it is something you're running a promotion or something like that, that you want to just have it enabled for 2 days or 3 days, you can set that up on a time window. And then you can also build custom filters if you want to target some of those features to, let's say, a certain type of browser or something a little bit more specific. You have the option to do that. Obviously, that last one will require more code than the time window. The one that we're going to see in a little bit in the demo is a time window, which you'll see, and it only takes you a couple lines of code to do that. You also have access to previous versions. So you have the ability to compare the entire store with a previous version of it, and you will be able to see the differences with the keys, with the values, so that you can figure out, if there was a change, not who, but when did it change and whatnot. So if you don't want to do that in the repo and you don't want to look at it that way, you can go into the Azure portal and do the comparison a little bit faster this way. You can also compare between different instances. So if you have your QA instance of the configuration and you have a separate one for UAT, but they should have the same values, for example, you can compare between the two and making sure that if they're supposed to have the same values, that there's nothing different there. You can also view individual key history. So if you go into the keys that you have in your Azure configuration, you can see here, it shows you the entire history of all the changes that have happened. If you expand one of those, we will see in a little bit, it will tell you what was the previous value at that particular point in time. And then complements key vault. So if you already have any secrets or any sensitive information in Key Vault, you can set those values up as a value here on Azure App Configuration and access them through that way from your application as well. So those two services work really well hand in hand. The other thing that you can do is from the portal as well, you can restore previous versions of a key. So again, if you're doing a configuration and you find out that somebody changed a value by accident yesterday, you can put it back to a previous version of it through the portal if that's something that you want to do. Okay, so I did have in the description of the talk that this was going to be a little bit heavier on the demo side. So that's all I have as far as theory goes. Does anyone have any questions about anything that discussed? Yeah.
So is there any kind of override or layering structure to where you have a standard default across everything, but then a labeled value can override that on top of it?
Yes. Yeah. So the way that you configure it, that's actually the way that it does. If you don't have a a label, it will just take whatever value that doesn't have a label. So you can do it that way. The other thing that I just came across, which I had been looking for a while, if you still want to make changes locally and test changes locally, you can also use a local file, kind of override those two. So we'll take the Azure App Configuration first, and then the local file if you still want to do testing locally. I don't have a demo of that, but that's one of the things that I'll probably fix, or I'll probably add to the repo if you guys want to check that out. So what are we going to cover, or what are we going to see in this demo? So we're going to obviously access app configuration without going through the key vault, so just reading non-sensitive values out of it. Obviously the dynamic configuration. We're going to look at feature flags and how you can access those previous versions, how you can do the comparison between the two. Now, we all know that demos don't always go as expected. So with that in mind, I have this little prayer that I hope will help me. So let this code compile in not an hour, but a little while. Allow this application to run with speed and zest, as this will keep users glued to my test. If my code blows up in my face, do it with style and grace. And last but not least, when all is said and run, let the requirements be correctly done. So hopefully that will be enough to not have any issues with it.
It's amazing.
That is the link where I found it, because God knows we need some of those when you're doing demos. All right, so let's move to, let's look. Yeah, there will be a deliberate error in the demo, just FYI. So if you see it happen, it's because I meant for it to fail. But we'll talk about it in a second.
That's the trick I use in lectures too.
So the application itself that you're going to see is nothing but the Blazor template. The reason for that is because I want to focus on the actual app configuration and what you would have to do. But other than that, there's nothing, nothing really going on the application itself that you need to worry about. Again, the code is up in my repo if you want to take a look at that. So this goes back to the question that was asked before of if you can do an override for the keys so that you can use those labels, but you can also use values that don't have any labels. So this is a way that you would, you would set it up. So you will take first any keys that do not have a value, and then you will take based on the environment name. That's how it's going to assign the values, and that's how you can differentiate between the two. This is what it looks like. It takes these values, the third version, and then this environment value. It's coming from Azure App Configuration. So what that looks like, this is the Azure portal, and if you go, this is an instance that I have already up for this demo. If you go into Configuration Explorer, these are all the keys that I have. As you can see, so I have there a couple values or a couple keys that actually have a label with a different environment. Some of these don't have any label. And this one that you see right here, it's a reference to key vault, and you can tell that obviously by the content type. It shows you when it was last modified, and so on and so forth. So let me close this. Let me do, so we're going to look at that key vault reference. Just change this real quick. And then I have this deployed in Azure, and we'll see it in Azure in a little bit, but I want to show this kind of step by step. Obviously, if I try to run this, it should fail. And come on. And this is the one that I said where I actually wanted to fail, or it was actually going to fail. The reason is because I don't have any sort of configuration for the key vault. Obviously, it's going to throw an error saying that there's no, I don't really have access. I cannot read that. that particular value from the configuration. So that's where this little guy comes in. So if I run that again, it should pull up the, it should now pull up the value of that key vault. I know what it did. And what I'm missing is this right here. Okay. Let's try that one more time. Okay, so now we have that value for pulling up from the configuration. Now that that value that is actually stored on the key vault, and as you can see, I said that it works really well with a key vault. So if you were to create a value here on the portal, you have the option to create just a straight up key value like the ones I have up here, or you can create a key vault reference, and it automatically connects you to any key vaults that you might have, and you can go ahead and create it that way. So super easy to connect those two services together if you have any configuration values that you are taking from there. So let's look at the dynamic configuration now. So this is going to be using the polling method that I talked about. I have a Sentinel key that is I'm going to query every minute or so for any changes on the configuration. Again, you don't want to do that because you obviously are going to be submitting requests to that to the Azure App Configuration, but also that kind of takes away of the whole dynamic thing because you're really not going to be polling every minute in a realistic scenario. If you are, you're going to get in trouble. But still, just want to show you real quick what that will look like. Let me close this, and I'm going to restart. And in the meantime, I'm going to come over here. So this is the Sentinel key that I have here. So I'm going to change the value of the development. And in this case, I'm going to change this. And apply. Key values are updated. And it's going to take about a minute or so, but after a little bit, this will show up the updated value without having to rebuild the application. Come on. See if this one shows it yet. So this is the version that I have up in Azure, deployed in Azure. This one has the dynamic configuration with the service bus. So you can see that one already updated because it's using the bus instead of waiting until a minute has passed before querying it. And this one still hasn't updated.
So the service bus lets you get the event immediately.
Yeah. I might have missed something else in there. Let me take a minute, take a quick look. I think I'm missing this one. See, I have to change one more time, but since we touched base on the service bus, when you set it up in your Azure App Configuration, what you do is you go here on Events, and here is the event subscription that I have right now. But if I didn't have anything at the moment, what I would do is I would just click on event subscription. You give it a name. You can choose a schema that you want to use. You select the topic that you want to post it to. And as of right now, you only have option to select the key value modified or a key value deleted. Right now, I'm using both on the same event, but if you want to follow a different flow, or you might want to raise an alert if there's a key value deleted, you might be able to, you could set up different event subscriptions and just process those differently. You might want to notify someone, hey, somebody deleted something here. And then, so when you set it up here, webhook is one of the options that you have here. Mine, I have it as a service bus queue, but you can do an Azure function. You can do storage queues, event hubs. So depending on what you want to use, you can set it up that way. What am I missing here? There you go. All right, so let's try this one more time. It's not the preferred method, but I still want to make sure that you guys take a look at it in case that you want to implement it that way. The next part, while that's loading, that obviously has the updated value because I just rebuilt it, but let's try doing it one more time. Let's change this one as well. So there you go. Let's give it a minute. Let's see if this one updated. Come on. I guess that prayer didn't work out.
Just give you a heads up, if you since you're pulling from the internet on some of this, with him streaming to the internet, may
There you
be
go.
running very sluggish.
Yep. So there you go. Both of them are there. So you can see there are two different methods depending which one you want to use. If there's an application that you're not really worried about maybe refreshing right away, you can use a polling method. If you don't want to set up the code to use the push method, you do have to write obviously a piece of code that will consume the event or the message from the service bus in order to use the push method. But if not, you can just do it with that little piece of code. I'm going to
Is this parameterized functions, or is this, I thought programs, yes, only ran on startup. Is the polling in the pipeline work somewhere else in the application?
For the push, you mean?
Well, you're setting up the configuration here for it, but
Mhm.
I thought like configuration apps only ran once on startup. Is that right?
Yeah, but that's why, so this configuration refresh, that's what it allows you to do. So in this case, the way that I configure it, and it's gonna run every time that when it does a query, if there's a change to the Sentinel key, it's actually gonna do the refresh, even though it's running on the program.cs. Does that make sense?
Kind of, yeah. I think I do understand it correctly.
Yeah. And then this is what you would use if you want to do the push method. So this would be the difference between the two. So here is you're setting the cache expiration. So when that expires, it will do the new query to the configuration. In this case, it's gonna just check that Sentinel key, and you're telling it to refresh all the values. But the code itself to update that So this is a service bus. This is a dynamic one. So when I'm getting a message from the service bus, I'm just telling the configuration to refresh. Okay, so the next part that I wanted to show is the feature flags. So if that's something that you want to use in your application, and I'm actually going to use that. So I'll still show you the code. So you use feature flags to your application. You also need to do add feature management up here so that you can use that, but it works the same way. And you can still use either the pull method, or you can still use either one of those to refresh the features as well. So over here, I'm going to look at the one that I have published. Down over here on the left-hand side, there should be another option for, I think it's weather service or something like that. I have it hidden right now because it's part of or I'm using it with feature flag. So if I go over here, the configuration explorer, you will see here your feature management. So right now I have two features, one in development and one in production. The one in production has a feature filter of type time window. So if I were to enable this, and then I go over here and I update my Sentinel key, in this application, we'll give it a minute. This one was a lot faster, but that feature flag, again, because I have that push method, it refreshes both the configuration and any feature flags that you have configured. So immediately, again, if you find out that, hey, we put this feature out there in production, it wasn't supposed to be there until next week or whatever the case may be, you don't have to rebuild, you don't have to redeploy. You just go into configuration, turn that off, and if everything is set up the way that this application is, you're done. So save you a lot of time, a lot of headaches to have something like this up in your application. Now,
the time window, is it like a one-time thing, or do you put it on a rotating schedule?
it is on a one-time thing. So actually, that is the next thing that we're going to look at. So that one I'm going to do over here. So I'm going to do. Now, that is really all you have to do if you want to use a time window for your feature management. You don't really have to make any, have to write any more code. I do have to change this from development to production because I have those labels in there. And then let me rerun this. And while that's running, I am going to look at so we're going to edit this one. There is obviously a warning sign here because the time window or the window that I've specified for this one is in the past. So that's one way where you can see if you have valid or not. So this one is just, you can just set it up for a particular period of time. I don't think you can set it up on a rotation or anything like that. But if you have your feature flags as, if you're pushing them with a template, with an ARM template, or you have them as part of your deployment, that's something that you could do if you want to push that. Might be able to do it that way. So let me change this to obviously today's date. So September 29th. And that is $39. And then September 29. Change that to, let's just leave that. If I hit apply, And then we still have to update that Sentinel key because that's what we're using on in the application to make all these updates. And we're going to give it a couple minutes. As you can see again, this is the version of the application before we made that change. When that time window hits in 1 more minute, if I refresh the application, we'll be able to see it in a minute. While we're waiting for that, we're going to look at the comparison functionality that I mentioned during the presentation. So this is the comparison for the entire store. So as you can see here, let me close this. If compare against a different one, so this is a different store, a different instance that I have. So I'm going to compare that. So today at 8 in the morning, and I'm going to compare it to the same period of time. Now this UI always gets me because one of the first times I tried to run it, I couldn't figure out if I had to change something else until I realized that the button to compare is up here. So it shows you the difference between the two. So this tells you that these are keys that are present on this particular version or in this particular resource that you don't have over here. This one, it tells you if it's comparing this Sentinel keys. They both have Sentinel keys, but they have obviously different values. And then this here, it tells you that you have the key here, but not on this other instance. So again, if it is something that one of your environments just went bonkers all of a sudden, you can compare if you have it separate, or you can compare it against itself. So if we go back here, so let's compare with, that sounds good. So you will see the difference in the values. So these two have remained the same. These two have obviously changed because as the Sentinel key has been changing values throughout the day today. So again, a very good way to quickly identify if there were any changes to the configuration that might have broken any of your environments. Now, if we go to the Configuration Explorer, actually, this one should already be there. I'll check that in a second. But in the meantime, I'm going to go back to the Configuration Explorer. So if I go in here, so you'll see here that there's a history option, which is the other one that I mentioned. So it shows you the details of the key. So the name, the label, and and the history of the value. If I expand this, it'll tell me at 629, the value was white, the content type, and then you can see any changes individually here as well. If you want, you can restore the values. So click of a button, you can restore a previous value. Again, if you run into the situation where you find out that this is the culprit for something breaking in any of your environments, you can just click on restore. You would obviously have to update your Sentinel key if you want that to be reflected on the application. But if that is the case, again, immediately you were able to restore a previous value and bring it back to a stable environment if that's something that broke all of a sudden.
Does that restart the app at all, or is that just?
Nope. That's the advantage, that you don't really have to wait for it. You have to wait for the message to make it to the application, but other than that, you would see no significant change or no significant delay on the application itself.
What's the binding like in the view? Like that view you're showing, what's the binding to the object like?
I'm just pulling using the configuration. So I'm just using as you would pull any other configuration values.
Use a dictionary.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay. So any other questions before I keep going? Okay. So obviously, if you are if you were using this in an actual environment, or if you were doing this in production, or in a real world setting, you probably wouldn't be changing this in the portal. So I do have an ARM template for that particular Azure App Configuration store. So we're going to do something similar to what we just did, but we're going to do it through an actual deployment. So this is more akin to what you would do if you were actually doing it in an actual scenario. So yeah. Push that.
Give you a heads up on Visual Studio Code. If you click File, there's an icon that says autosave. That would I think every time you make a change, it automatically saves it in like 5 seconds.
Oh, okay.
Very aggressive, but yeah.
Aggressive ain't the damn word.
All right. So I do have a release over here set up, and it's already going. It's going to take a couple minutes, but again, the principle is the same thing. And you will see one more time that you have those two, or you decouple your configuration from your code. So if you have to make a configuration change, you can do it completely separate. You can lock down your configuration repos and make it less accessible, like only certain people can make changes. So you know that if something goes wrong, there's a smaller list of people that you actually have to check, or there's a smaller or quicker troubleshooting probably if you have to go and look at configuration changes. So obviously once that release is complete, if I update my application, again, value is updated. I did not have to recycle the application, restart it, rebuild it, redeploy it, which depending on how you build the application, you know that can take a long time depending on how you have everything set up. I know that it would have saved us a lot of headaches on some of those scenarios that I mentioned. So, hopefully that is something that you can implement on your applications as well. You do have, sorry, was there a question?
Yeah.
Yep.
So how does the ARM template in the GitHub repo get wired up to this Azure the app and stuff?
So I have the config store name set up here. Okay. So that's the name that it is using. I have all my key value names here. So I have right now I'm only changing the font color key. I have the option of changing both labels, and obviously the Sentinel key has to be included because that's what I'm using to detect those values or those changes. And then this is just basically ARM template notation saying that it's doing a loop through all those parameters that I have set up, and it's pushing those values over to Azure App Configuration. And then on the pipeline itself, you configure so that it targets the actual, so I have the resource group. You can select to create or update the resource group, so it's an incremental deployment. So it's gonna either update or add anything. What's that?
I was letting him know someone just came in.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No worries.
I just heard someone's keys.
You specify the resource group, the location, but everything else is targeted based on the name of the Azure App Configuration. So if I change that to the other one that I have, the ARM test, all the changes would go to that one instead. Yeah. Yeah, so I have a trigger, a continuous deployment trigger. So anytime that there's a change, it will just trigger a release, and you can update the configuration. So that is the last thing before we actually go pizza, real quick. You have an import and export functionality. So if you want to take your configuration files and import the values from there, you have the option to do that. I tried this earlier, and it's very limited in the sense that it's not going to automatically wire your key vault values the same way that I have them right now. But still, it's a good way to get started with if you want to just import that. So let me, where is it? Let me take another one. So app settings. It asks you for the separator and how it's going to write them to the store. And then if I click apply, hopefully it doesn't mess anything up. And if I go now to the configuration management, now you will see that I have these new keys that I did not have before. So I have a connection string. You probably don't want to put this directly here. You could probably want to put it on the key vault. So that would really be the only limitation there, or something that you might not want to use it for. But again, if you want to get started quickly and import some values from your configuration files, you have the option to do that as well. Any questions?
The AD for key vault is that more secure than like the app setting JSON Git configuration?
Yeah. So for example, for the application.
I don't see dynamic connection string in the app settings, not JSON.
Yeah. So the way that I have that for the key vault, you actually have to obviously give permission to your application to access the key vault. So it would be specific to that particular resource. So in here, we'll see if I come to access policies. That's something that I had to add, explicitly. I had to get specify the get permissions for my application to be able to access it. Otherwise, it'll blow up as soon as you try to start your application, saying that you do not have permissions to access the key vault. Any other questions? All right. I think that's it for me. Thank you all for your attention. Thank you, Matt, for having me. We can go have some pizza.
Yeah, let's have some pizza. And we'll probably wrap up with quick questions at the end as well.
Sure.
But, yeah, sounds good.
All right.
Sorry about the wait, folks.
Thank you, everyone.
you.